Hey everybody, Scott Wikle. You're listening to My Kind of Country right here on Fish Creek Radio with our very special tribute to the great Lefty Frizzell. I don't think I could have done this show properly without having this gentleman on with me tonight because I think of anybody, he has carried on the legacy of Lefty Frizzell both in the music and also in books, and he's written a screenplay about Lefty's life, and he remains very active in preserving the legacy of Lefty Frizzell. And there's few that knew him better, and I'm very happy to have him with us to talk about some great memories with Lefty tonight. This is my good friend David Frizzell. David, how are you tonight?
Scott, it is great to be with you, and you're talking about a subject that has been the top front of my subject matter here for the last, as long as I can remember, the great Lefty Frizzell. And you're right about I wrote a memoir of Lefty, and all my memories have been with him throughout my lifetime, and especially during the times when I was on the road with him, working with him, and just being with him day after day, night after night, for just years and years. And he was just I really would like for people to know how it was to kind of be around Lefty. Was not an ordinary day, I can tell you. He was a great man.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I've heard so many great stories with the other folks that have been on the show, and you know, some of the things I really picked up with Lefty, he was quite a practical joker, and he always loved to get a rise out of somebody to see what kind of a reaction he could get.
You know, he would go out of his way. he would actually go out of his way to do a practical joke on you or something. He used to go to those. I guess he'd go once he'd have a little time, and he'd be out on the road someplace. And he'd go to some of them joke stores, where you can pick up these different little type of jokes and stuff, And then he'd come by the house, when I was a kid, he'd come by, and he'd play all them jokes on his kids, on his brothers and sisters. I remember one time, it was in Beaumont, Texas, where he lived, and I had been out in the car. We drove there, and I was still asleep. When I woke up, everybody else was in the house, and so I got up and I went in, and I was still about half groggy from being asleep in that car all night, driving to Beaumont. And so I sat down in the chair there. He said, "Hey, David," he said, "here, while you're just sitting there," he said, "look at this book." So he handed me this little book, about a 5x7 little book, and I opened it up, and it's full of batteries. It just shocked me awake. You know what I mean? I threw that book clear across the room. But he just got such a kick out of just stuff like that. And I remember my sister was doing the dishes. My older sister was doing the dishes, and he walked up behind her and gave her a big old hug, patted her on the back. Pretty soon he walked away. Pretty soon she started itching all over. He had put itch powder all over her neck and back.
Oh my gosh!
No, he just always was into some kind of a practical joke, and laughing was his thing, man. He got such a great kick out of being around people and making them laugh and making up stories and making up making up stuff that matter of fact, he'd write plays. In his head, at the time we was doing it, he'd make them up as it was going along. He'd give everybody a part, and he just liked to get everybody involved in everything he was doing, and he was so good at it. And it was always so much fun having Lefty at the house.
Well, I'll tell you, from talking to you guys over the years, I think that's kind of a family trait. It seems like you all love to laugh and you have a great time.
Oh my goodness gracious! And it wasn't just to us family; it was to everybody knew. Just from Roger Miller to Merle Haggard to just everybody, he played little jokes on them and always had them laughing about something, and always something. And so it was always just a real good time being around him. And I remember many, many times, as I worked with him, I opened his show and made sure that he was at the shows and make sure the guitars were in tune and that sort of stuff. But from 1956, I just a kid, 1956 to 1960, I was with him opening the shows. And that's when I first met, all the people that was George Jones, Berlin Husky, Johnny Cash, and June Carter, and just everybody that was in the country music business at that time. And grew up around them and knew them for the rest of their life or the rest of mine, But he was the one that made it all happen for me. But not only me, but there was a lot of people. If you ask them, what do you think of Lefty? Well, he was the greatest song stylist that I've ever heard. And man, when his song come on the radio, I'd pull the car off the road so I could just sit and listen to it. And very few times that's happened to me, but it happened with Lefty when I hear him, or George Jones when he stopped loving her today. I heard that on the radio. I actually had to pull off the highway.
Oh yeah.
I pulled off the highway so I could hear it. But there's just a very few of those that you can remember that you went to that kind of extreme to be able to hear the song, and concentrate on hearing the song.
You're absolutely right. Well, you, I was reading your in the book, and the book is called "I Love You a Thousand Ways." It's the Lefty Frizzell story, folks, and you can go to davidfrizzell.com. The book is available there, and you also have a CD set, an audio set for the book as well on there. And,
absolutely, absolutely. Everything that's in that book is on those CDs. I guess they are.
Well, I was reading a part on there, and I wanted to ask you a little more about this. Lefty and did a tour with Hank Williams, and you had a little section in there you were talking about them swapping songs.
Lefty and Hank did a 6-day tour throughout Arkansas and Louisiana, and so while they were out there, they became even better friends than they were before. And one of the last days they were together was after the tour was over and they was getting ready to go their separate ways. They had locked themselves in a motel room and was switching songs back and was listening to songs, trying to write some songs. And Hank Williams, I think, came up with the idea of, hey, let's just each write a song and give it to each other, but let's not tell anybody who wrote what. And then let's just see what happens, right? Well, from what I understand, both songs went high on the charts, probably even as high as #1 on the Billboard chart. And neither one of them would ever tell you who wrote what.
No kidding.
But over the years, I kind of thought I knew, and Jeff Williams thought that she knew, but we don't really know. There's no way of really ever knowing.
Well, what's your best guess?
Well, let me think back on it again, 'cause I thought I had it one time. For one time, I thought it was a Bugger's Got a Hold of It. But then I realized that song was written before Lefty knew Hank, so probably isn't it. But I'll have to think about it now, because I haven't had that on my mind in quite a while. So I'm have to go back through the songs again and try to remember what was out at that time. But that really did happen. As a matter of fact, they left the motel. They went to the airport. Well, they were taken to the airport, and I think it was in Louisiana and Shreveport, I believe. Anyway, Lefty flew back up to Dallas, where his wife Alice picked him up at the airport, and Hank flew back to Nashville. It was only after he flew back to Nashville that they realized that Hank had left his car at the motel.
Oh, jeez.
In Shreveport. So it just gets crazy. Those guys are, what was so different between them and the people of today is that they were making it up as they go. There was nobody before them that they could say, oh, well, we're doing something like whoever else, No, there was nobody else. There wasn't anybody else.
Yep.
Bob Wills was out there being just crazy as he could be, and Lefty and Hank were right along with him. So that was a time in country music when you didn't make any, you didn't do like anybody else, because you was making it up as you go, because there was nobody before you.
That's right.
Now we can say, oh man, you're doing what Lefty did. Oh well, I'm doing what I heard that Hank did. But
well,
those days they wasn't able to do that, so they'd make it up as they go. They set the standards that we abide by today, and it was pretty low. I'm trying to raise my standards throughout the years. But anyway, we had more fun with those guys than you can even imagine, and they taught us simply everything. And Lefty, every day that I remember being around him, when I first came to work with him, and way back in the early days, when he'd come by, when we were living as a family, when we was just growing up, he'd come by, maybe pick me up for the weekend, take me for one of his dates, drop me back off at the mom and dad's house on the way back when the shows were over. And all that time he'd tell me, he said, now David, he said, you're learning everything, you're getting to see everybody, you're getting, he said, but somewhere in all of this, you got to find yourself in all. You got to find David Frizzell. We don't need another Hank Williams. We don't need another Lefty. We don't need another George Jones. We need a David Frizzell. So you've got to be David. You've got to be David. And I heard that, oh my goodness gracious, almost like all the time. And I remember one day, one morning in Northridge, California, where he lived in California back in the 50s. I was sitting in the den, and I was just playing the guitar. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was just sitting there either trying to make up a song or just singing something. And he walked by, and he's on the way to the kitchen, and he walked by, and he stopped. And I looked up at him, and he looked down at me, and he said, you got to be David. Remember, you've got to find David and all this. Then he just walked into the kitchen, right? In about 15 minutes, he came back by, and he stopped again. And he looked down at me, and I looked up, and he said, we don't need another Bob Dylan either.
I wanted to ask about Curly Chalker, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he's responsible for coming up. Every big star at that day had their own signature lick. It was like Ernest Tubb had the guitar lick. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh God, yeah.
And
you don't hear that anymore. Isn't that crazy?
No.
Other than Merle,
yeah.
Owens had kind of his own sound.
Oh, absolutely. But the intro for "Always Late." If I'm not mistaken, I think that was the first time that Lefty Frizzell signature lick was used in one of his songs. Is that right?
You know what? Back in those days, the signature licks were kind of in, and of course you don't hear them anymore today. And I still like them. I like Merle Haggard. Man, you could tell it was going to be Merle at the first. Right at the first, but that's going to be Merle singing here in a second. And I love that. I still like it, but somehow or other the business has gotten away from it, and I still like the signature lick. But you're right about Always Late. It had that steel guitar lick, and I tell you what, we lost Merle Haggard this last year, and man, he just goodness gracious. What else can you say about Merle Haggard? He was just the most incredible. Yeah, but it wasn't just there again. It wasn't just his great, incredible singing or his the best in the world writing, but it was also the way he'd walk into a room or the way he'd say hello to you, or or it was just him. But he was. But not long ago, we did a tribute to Merle on RFD television, and they asked me to sing a song on there, and I chose a particular song called "That's the Way It Was in '51."
Yeah.
And because there was a story behind that song that I wanted to tell the story of me and Merle because of that song, and so I sang the song on that show, and it was so neat when we got to the so incredible. Some of the best players in the world we have in Nashville, right now. And we always have had, basically. But we got to the show. It was rehearsing the show like the day before we actually filmed the show. And so I was getting ready to just rehearse with the band. That's the way it was in '51. And we got... I walked up there, and the steel guitar player, Mike Johnson, great steel guitar player, one of my favorite steel guitar players I ever heard, Mike Johnson. And he said, "Oh, David," he said, I got a special thing that for the ending of this song." He said, "Well, I'll just show it to you when we get there." I said, "Okay." So we went through the song, and on the very end, he played the opening of "Always Late."
I love that.
Yeah. That on the steel, and he looked at me with that incredible smile he's got, and I said, that's the way it's supposed to be, but that's the way it needs to be.
Yep.
So we actually filmed the show, filmed my song on that show. If you get a chance to watch me singing, that's the way it was in 51. Listen to the very end where Mike Johnson plays.
I saw it.
You're
right.
Always Late.
I loved it. I thought that was just perfect.
And I think Merle would have loved that.
Oh, you
Merle
know
would
he
have
would.
loved that.
You know he would.
I mean, he just would.
He probably would have put it on the record if he had thought of it back then.
If he had thought of it, he probably would have. He was just an amazing man. But you know what? I've been a very fortunate fella in my lifetime that I've been around folks like him and Brother Lefty and Johnny Cash and Marty Robbins, for heaven's sakes. Oh, my God. Conway Twitty. Come on, it just goes on and on. I knew all these guys, did shows with all these guys throughout my life. And I've had some pretty good shows, but they were great when they were there. You know?
Oh, yeah.
They were pretty good shows, and then there were times when I was with these guys. You know? Oh, man. Unbelievable.
Well, tell me a little bit about Jack Starnes. As I was reading, Jack Starnes, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the co-founders of Starday Records, which was George Jones' first label. And I was reading in the book that he did a lot of work for Lefty before that happened, too.
Well, he really did. And the fellow by the name of Jim Beck was the one who had the studio in Dallas that Lefty went and to just do some demos. And when he went into that studio in Dallas with some musicians, he did a few Ernie Stubbs songs. He actually did a couple of Jimmy Rogers songs, and then he did "I Love You 1,000 Ways." was one of the first songs that Lefty had written. And then Jim Beck said, "Oh man," he said, "this is great." He said, "This is great." He said, "But do you have anything up tempo?" He said, "First," he said, "Do you have any originals?" And they said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I've written a couple." And so he did "I Love You 1,000 Ways," because he had already did an Ernie Stubbs and a Jimmy Rogers song. And so Jim Beck said, "Do you have any originals?" And Lefty said, "Oh yeah, well, yeah." So he did "I Love You 1,000 Ways," which is a slow ballad, and was one of the greatest songs I ever heard, and was still probably in my lifetime one of the best top 5 songs that I've ever heard in my life. Was "I Love You 1,000 Ways." I love that song. Anyway, Jim Beck actually had anything up tempo. And I said, "I've been working on this idea." And he said, "Hey boys," he said, "grab a D." And he said, "If you got the money, honey, I got the time." Anyway, Jim Beck said, "That's it. That's the one. That is the one." And Lefty said, "Well, it's not written." He said, "Well, write it." Write it. So Lefty walked away. He said, "I'll have it done in a few minutes." So he walked in through the studio and around everything. Came back in a little while. The song was written, and they put the song down on that little session. And Jim Beck took "I Love You 1,000 Ways," took "If You Got the Money," and came all the way to Nashville with him. And he talked Lefty out of half riders on him. He said, I got to have at least half riders to be able to go through all the trouble of going to Nashville and pitching these songs for you. So I got to have at least half. So Lefty said, half something's better than a whole, that old saying. And so he let Jim Beck have half of the song. And Jim Beck came to Nashville, and of course that's all in the book too about how that came down. Where he brought him to play for little Jimmy Dickens, who was hot at the time. He brought, especially If You Got the Money at the time, he really wanted little Jimmy Dickens to hear that song because Jimmy was doing those kind of funny,
the novelty songs, yeah.
Songs.
Yeah.
And so he brought him to Nashville and with Don Law, who was trying to find songs for little Jimmy Dickens. Anyway, later on, after all this started going, and Don Law said, "Well, I want to meet the guy who actually wrote it. I love his singing." So he came and met Lefty and signed him to Columbia Records. So Lefty had his first hits, was "I Love You 1,000 Ways," and "If You Got the Money, I Got the Time." "If You Got the Money, I Got Time" was Lefty's first #1 song with Columbia Records in 1950. The second #1 song he had was "I Love You 1,000 Ways." Those two particular songs. And anyway, later on, as they started booking and doing tours and stuff, Jim Beck was taking 50% of everything Lefty made. Everything Lefty did was 50%. And Lefty eventually started feeling like, here's Jim Beck sitting in driving the Cadillac that he bought, sitting in the house that Lefty bought, and he figured that was too much. Should have been a little better deal than that. So he worked in Beaumont, Texas, for a fellow named Jack Starnes. His wife, Neva Starnes, owned a nightclub in Beaumont, Texas. So Lefty was booked there, and he met Jack Starnes. Jack said, I can make you a better deal. I can treat you better. I can get you better bookings. I can do a lot more for you. And that's how Jack came into Lefty's life. Ended up, Jack did all of that same kind of stuff. All he was in it for was for the money, and Lefty eventually got to where he didn't trust anybody at all, you know. And so he never, once he got away from Jack Starnes after a big lawsuit, he finally got away from Jack Starnes. He moved out of Beaumont, Texas, moved out to California, and during that time, 1953, 1954, 1951, he had Always Late and Mom and Dad Waltz were the two big songs of that year. And so he moved out to California, but he never trusted anybody else in the management position of his career. Too bad. If he'd have got somebody that was a real manager and was managing for the right reasons, I would have loved to see Lefty have that kind of representation.
That happened
Lefty
a lot.
never trusted anybody else.
It happened a lot back in those days, unfortunately. Tell me about Steve Stebbins.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
Tell me about Steve Stebbins.
Steve Stebbins was a booking agent at Americana Promotions and Productions in California, and he was a booking agent. And Lefty, if he had trusted anybody, Steve would have been it. If he, as far as somebody he trusted that he was going to do something nice, to do it, you know, not rip you off while he was doing it. Steve would have been probably that guy. But Steve ended up being a booking agent for Lefty and a lot of the other acts around California at that time. You know, Town Hall Party was a TV show out of California in those days, and Lefty was and Freddie Hart, who Lefty helped. As you've already talked to Freddie, so you know that Lefty was a big one of the first people to help Freddie Hart in those days.
Oh, yeah. And
brought Freddie out to California and so forth. But they were both regular members of the Town Hall Party, and Steve Stebbins was one who booked all that, and he booked all those people that were on the Town Hall Party, and so he was the big booking agent out of California.
We were talking about Lefty's big hits and everything, and he accomplished something that was I don't think had been done before, and it's not been done since. He had 4 songs in the top 10 Billboard charts at the same time. And
right.
If I'm not mistaken, it was Always Late, Mom and Dad's Waltz, I Want to Be With You Always, and Traveling Blues.
Exactly. Number 1, number 2, number 4, number 6, I believe. And if you'll look even further, you'll notice that Hank Williams had 3 at that same time.
Well, I guess
so Lefty and Hank covered the top 10.
I guess that line that Haggard wrote, Hank and Lefty crowded every jukebox.
That was one of the reasons why I tried to get that song from Merle. That's the way it was in 51. I said, Merle, I got to have that song. I got to have Hank and Lefty crowded every jukebox. That's what it was in 51. Man, I love that song.
Now, you produced an album that was put out after Lefty passed away. It was called The Legendary Lefty Frizzell, and you went in and actually you put new instrumentation around him. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. When I got to Nashville in 81, Scott, everything I would hear on Lefty would either be not right or it was told by somebody else's point of view that real happiness, and I was just going around upset all the time. You know, I mean, I got to Nashville in 1981 with You're the Reason God Made Oklahoma. That brought town, but boy, I tell you what, I was still listening to Lefty. Everything was Lefty, and everything I heard about him was not right or incorrect in some way. And finally, my wife Jo said, "Well, you know," he said, So that's how when I got into writing the book. But before that, I went to the CEO. I went to Columbia Records, and I told the guy in charge. I told him that I said, you know, the only thing, and when Lefty was here for 22, 25 years with Columbia Records, from the very beginning up to almost the end of Lefty's life, he was with Columbia Records. I said, and the only thing that dates Lefty is those tracks you guys made. I said, if you take Lefty's voice off of those tracks and put them on brand new tracks, you realize that he's just as current singer, vocalist as anybody is today. And the guy, he said, really? And I said, yeah. So my idea is to take and do a new album on Lefty by building some new tracks and taking his voice off the old tracks and put them on the new ones and make some new ones. He said, well, let's do it. I couldn't believe it. He said, let's do it. So he gave me a little budget, and I brought in some of the great players. Oh, my gosh, great players. Now, that's just probably 82 maybe. 82, I guess, probably, when I did this. And I picked, I kind of made a mistake now in hindsight. I wish I'd have went and took all the big hit songs and still kept the signature licks, like Always Late, you know, and but just built the tracks around brand new, you know, today or that day, 81, 82, and then put the signature licks back on there as well, and then just redo the tracks and then put his voice back on top of them, and then put new background voices on them. And that's what me and Shelley West did. Me and Shelley was on a lot of those background voices. And in those days, let me tell you, Scott, that when they recorded some of those early tracks, back in the days, they was on one or two tracks. They only used one or two to put them all, everybody on one or two tracks. So if the background singer made a mistake or a guitar player made a mistake, they wouldn't necessarily go back and redo it.
Right.
Sometimes they just leave them, you know. And my ear would pick up those bad notes every time. I just couldn't stand it. And because you don't have to do that, you know, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
And we can go back in and just replace even a little bit of a note, even a half a note if we want to. So I went in and brought the greatest players that I knew, and I knew everybody in town here, and we brought in the great players, and then when there was a time when, I'll just give you an idea, when there was a time when the background singers would go off a key, off pitch, and they did it a lot. A fellow named Abe Mulkey was one of the people that sang harmony with a one-part harmony behind Lefty, second, in other words, harmony to Lefty. And sometimes he'd get a little bit off pitch. Nowadays, we just tune that voice, right?
Yeah.
In those days, it would be too much trouble to have them redo it. So they just leave it. And it just kill me every time I hear it. And so if I had to take the background voice off, I had to take Lefty's voice off, right? I'd lose them both. Or whatever was on that one track I had to, if I wanted to replace. If it was bad, I'd lose everything on that track. So when it come time to do that, I'd say, well, then I have to figure out what I can do about it. And in those days, in 81, we still didn't have tuning machines like we do today.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, now I can tune anything. I can tune an engine out there with it. I don't know. But I got them all over the house. But otherwise, I might have been able to just tune the background singer. But we had to take them off, and when we did, we took Lefty's voice off. Well, my brother Alan, this is the first time I've ever told anybody this, so your show is going to be the first to ever hear about this.
All right.
Was that I would bring Brother Alan in to imitate Lefty.
Is that right?
And he was so good at it. Man, Alan was, and the only other person that could have done it would have been Merle.
Yeah.
But I had Alan with me, so Alan, I had him going, and he replaced the line, or maybe 2 or 3 words, or whatever it was, or maybe the chorus, you know, whatever. And that's how it was done. Matter of fact, I have to tell you this to go with that, was that later on I played that album for my friend Merle, and even he didn't know it.
No.
And I never told him.
I didn't know that. I would have never guessed that either. Wow, that's cool.
I bet you Alan didn't even tell you that when you thought.
No, he didn't.
That. But that's
pretty
the
cool.
first time it's been told. So your show's gonna be the first one that ever heard of.
Well, all right, we got an exclusive on My Kind of Country. I love it.
But Alan was so good, bless his heart. I wouldn't have done it if he couldn't have done it. I mean, I'd had to think of something else. But well, I'll tell you one of the things that I've got on my slate for this year is to do a tribute to the great Lefty Frizzell. And almost everybody that I know wants to be a part of it. So if I do it, what I'm going to do is we're going to go in and do an updated version of like me doing a Lefty song, or Jimmy Fortune singing a Lefty song, and then we'll have Lefty on something, So a tribute to Lefty by everybody that admired Lefty Frizzell, and everybody wants to be a part of it. So that's one of the things I want to do this year.
Well, you be sure to let me know, and we'll do a feature on it on the show, you bet.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Scott, because there's a couple, 2 or 3 songs that I want to put on there that I wrote about Lefty. Right after he passed away in 75, July 19th, 1975, not too long after that, I started writing some songs about Lefty. One was We Won't Be Here and Always Late Anymore, was one of them. I want to redo that one. And, just some songs that dedicate to Lefty, and then put all these other songs of Lefty's on there,
We'll have to get Freddie to record that song that he wrote then for that. That'd be
and
great.
Freddie needs to do that song and
yeah.
put that on there. It needs to go on that tribute album. Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, yeah, keep me posted because we'll definitely we'll do a big feature on the show. I'm excited about that.
Well, after I wrote the Lefty book, the memoir of my brother Lefty, of my thoughts and everything that I remembered about the great Lefty, I wrote that book from Lefty's point of view. I want everybody to know that. I wrote whether it was right, wrong, or indifferent. Didn't matter to me. It was if Lefty thought it was this way, if Lefty made it happen that way, if Lefty believed it was this way, that's the way the book was written.
Yeah.
Was from Lefty's point of view. And that's how I wrote that whole book. If he thought it was this way, it was right this. That's how the book was written. And matter of fact, the book ended up being the CMA or CMT's book of the year when it came out a couple of years ago. And but if you ever really want to know what Lefty was like, if you want to know the insights of how it happened, how a kid from rags to riches, this was a true rags to riches, how that happened, how he made it happen, how he dealt with it when he did make it happen. I think it's important to know, Scott, that it's really important for you to know that Lefty had 4 songs in the top 10 at one time. Right? Never been done.
Yep.
But isn't it even better to know how he felt about having 4 songs in the top 10 at the same time? To me, that's what's important. And so that's how that book was written. So after I wrote the book, I did the audio book on it so that you could actually hear Lefty. And I read the book. I read the book for CDs. Mm-hmm. And there's 8 CDs in that product. And you actually hear Lefty sing the song. You actually hear Lefty sing a little bit of Always Late, or Mom and Dad Waltz, or You Got the Money, Got the Time, or just, you get to hear it. I use those songs as segues from one chapter to another. And you'd actually hear Lefty singing. Now, that's important to me because it's a book about a singer-songwriter. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to hear him sing,
Amen.
So that was the next idea. And so I did that. I wrote the book, did the audio portion of it so you could actually hear this man. And I like the fact that you could hear him talk. He didn't talk like anybody else. He changed the English language around. It's amazing. There's a piece in that audio book. If you haven't heard it, you've got to listen to it because it is an interview with Bill Mack, the radio station out of Fort Worth, big Hall of Famer Bill Mack, great friend of the family, and Merle Haggard. Bill Mack had Merle Haggard interviewing Merle in Fort Worth, and they called Lefty and got him on the phone. And it's the three of them, and it's the most amazing thing. I put the whole thing on audio book.
That's great.
If you haven't heard that, you need to look it up. It's in there.
I got to get that.
And you hear Lefty talk and hear him laughing and hear him how he would turn the English language around, and it's just amazing. Especially having Merle ask Lefty questions. It's just amazing. You got to hear it. It's well worth your time to go back and do it. But anyway, after I did those things, I stopped and I thought, what else can I do? My God, what else can I do that I can do? And so I decided. I had a guy. I contacted some people. A guy out of Hollywood, a screenplay writer, and I hired him to write the screenplay. Well, he wrote a screenplay, and I didn't really like it so much, and so I decided, well, I'm just going to do it myself. So that's when I started writing screenplays. I've written 5 different ways of listening to the Lefty story now.
Wow.
Told by different ways that you could tell the same story, because it's his life, so it has to be his life. But there's different ways you can tell about a subject, and so I told it a lot of different ways. The last one I wrote was for me and Merle, who we really want to do this thing together. Merle was so excited about being involved with the Lefty Frizzell project, and that is Lefty Frizzell Possible Movie, Lefty Frizzell soundtrack, and also doing the soundtrack for the movie. He was going to help me do it. We were all involved with doing it, and then actually this last year, October, November, I was going to get with him, and we was going to start the soundtrack for the movie. And we'd already have one, right?
Yeah.
And we was just going to pay for that ourselves. We were just going to do it ourselves. And we was going to do it at his place out in California, because he got this absolutely incredible studio out there.
Yeah.
Anyway, then he had to leave us, and that changed everything. When Merle had to go, and it just broke my heart and everybody else's.
Me too.
And so now I still got to do it. So I thought, but I wrote the screenplay around me and Merle telling the story of Lefty.
Mm-hmm.
So me and Merle would be in the movie as storytellers, right?
Wow.
So that's how the last screenplay was written, was me and Merle telling different parts of Lefty's life.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's how it was written.
That's cool.
Then there was a special song, I don't know if you've got it, Scott, that I wrote and put on some album some time back. It's called Goodbye.
I sure do.
You remember the song?
I love it.
Well, I want to put that in the movie. I want to put that. And the last scene I wrote for the new screenplay was me and Merle was going to be in San Antonio doing a concert, and we were going to I was going to sing that song in the concert, and I was going to have Merle walk out and sing the chorus with me.
Oh, wow.
For the end of the movie. Can you imagine that?
Man.
Do you remember that song? If you haven't got it, I'll make sure you got it.
I love it. I love it. I have it. I love it.
It's actually, the first part of the song is about Lefty. The second part is about Mama.
Yeah.
Those are the two important people in my life was Lefty and my mama. And so I wrote the song because I never got a chance to say goodbye to either one of them before they passed. And it always bugged me, always broke my heart every time I think about it. So finally I just had to write a song about it. So if you got the song, I hope you'll get a chance to listen to it.
Well, we'll play it. We'll play that at the end of the interview here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
but so anyway, that's the last screenplay that was sent out to California, and that's the one that my people's coming in from California talking to me about the movie, possible movie. This month they're coming in, flying in from California to talk to me about a possible movie. That's all I can say at this moment because that's where I'm at right now.
Well, you keep us posted, and we're
I will, Scott.
Sounds like you got a lot of great things.
I want to thank you before I get off here. Thank you for what you're doing. I don't think Lefty ever got the credit due. And if there's anything I can do about it, I'm going to do it. And if I really want to put this, I want to put the tribute album together with a lot of my friends that were that knew Lefty's. There's still some people here that knew Lefty. We just lost Jean Shepherd a while back, and she was one of Lefty's favorite female singers, and actually one of mine too. But really one in his from his time. But we just lost her this last year as well.
Thank you so much, David, for being on this very special show for My Kind of Country, our tribute to Lefty Frizzell. And we're going to play Goodbye right now. And, folks, I want you to listen very carefully to this. And also visit davidfrizzell.com because the book and the CDs are available there, and all of David's music, of course. And we'll look forward to hearing lots more about the tribute album and the movie, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy. See you, Scott. Bye-bye, buddy.